So Xavier Veilhan, thank you very much, and thank you to the whole team for welcoming us to your studio.
My pleasure.
Welcome to everyone online. Thank you very much for your participation to Change Now. So we are here to talk about what do artists embody for society, what do they represent, and how do they act concretely. So Xavier, you're one of the most internationally acclaimed French artists. Your work sits in the most prestigious museums in the world, but also in public space. Here in Paris, you are both inside Pompidou and outside Pompidou. And inside with a beautiful red rhino, and outside with the silhouettes of Pompidou architects, Piano and Rogers. And your latest works was in Stockholm last year. I'm thinking of the two Valberg giants. One which is 19 meters long, a very peacefully reclining figure of a man, and among all the different techniques of your broad practice, you also draw, you paint, you don't only do sculpture, but these monumental pieces, the very large ones that are traveling around the world, ask very relevant questions in terms of art and ecology. So that's the questions that you asked yourself, and that also you asked Sylvie Bétard a few months ago. So Sylvie, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
You are an entrepreneur. You founded a brand of paper. You also created La Réserve des Arts more than 10 years ago. A priceless mine of upcycled material for artists, for designers, for creators. So you have been working with waste for many years. And when I say waste, I mean resources. And today you are the director of the Upcyclery, and also the co-founder of Les Augures, to advise artists and institutions on how to reduce their environmental impact, and much more. So my first question will go to you, Xavier. This conversation that we're having now could not have happened if you, Xavier, had not thought about your own impact and the impact of your work. So you are not what we call an artiviste, your work does not necessarily talk about ecology, yet you wondered and you asked yourself some questions. What was for you the trigger, and where does this questioning come from?
I think one of the trigger was to realize at some point that before artistic reason, before economical reason, was the environmental reason to put on top of the pyramid of problem of questions. And I think it's a special point of view that I developed because being within the art world, because the relation to time is very different. It's a work of the instant and the moment and the contemporaneity, but at the same time it's a relation to time in a long term. And it reminds me, for example, the political issues about environmental questions, because you can't deal on a short term with those issues. And also I have access to a lot of great things, luxury hotel, travel in good conditions, and part of my work was not was kind of hidden to myself. For example, if I'm doing a show abroad, or right now I have a show in Japan, for example, how can I estimate and what is the benchmark to the consumption of energy that it involves, and is it worth doing it? And I realized at some point that I couldn't even formulate this question myself. So I heard about the work of les Augures, and the approach was very hand-on and practical. And for example, not ideological, but more oriented on the result, which I thought was worth starting this new direction. But I have to say it's a long-term process, and as we discussed, from scratch, it's not something you can solve completely. So what you have to achieve is to go to a better efficiency, but which can be 80% better, but you will never reach 100%.
I mean, you have sculptures in resin, in aluminum, in stainless steel. You use a coating and painting, but you, for the medium, for the materiality, what are you looking for in a material? Are you looking for aesthetic properties, the stories that are behind the material, or you can tell through the material, the provenance of the material, the physical resistance to outdoor conditions, because you do a lot of public art? What are you looking for?
So the efficiency is the first criteria, but the efficiency is very different if you an approach on the art which is more conceptual or philosophical, and also on the other hand you have the permanency of the material. There is a kind of a paradox with art, is that when you study art history, for example, you can see that the art is developing itself in certain periods, and then will disappear, like Renaissance, and but we have little work in quantities compared to what was produced during the Renaissance. So just to say that the idea of permanency of art is always associated. So when I'm producing something, people consider, because it's art, that it will last forever, which is not. So my situation is to combine and to make something which is a kind of a compromise between what I want to express and the mean I have, and the money I have, and the time I have, and how to lead to a certain impact and a certain sustainability, which is always the kind of a compromise. And the problem is that when you start with an idea, which is starting point from art is an idea, you consume very little energy with this idea, and when you try to develop it and make it fit in the real environment, which is the aim of art for me. Good art is an idea that is like a puzzle shape fitting into the reality. Then you start to consume and so this leads you to the question I was asking before: is it worth it? And it's not, art is not a question of occupying space. It's a mental space that you want to occupy. So it could be very easy to just have an idea and formulate it and say it, for example, like in conceptual art. But my area is also to build an object which has can be confronted to the real environment.
So you're talking about a sort of a puzzle, a mental puzzle and a physical puzzle. You say your works belong to a certain environment. So is this this question that you ask, is it worth it? Is it the first question that you asked Sylvie? What is the first question that you asked Sylvie?
What can we do?
And what did you answer?
We'll do it. The first question exactly was, what can we do to do better in the artwork and also in the studio, and it was really systemic. So in the Augures we never come with an answer. The most important is to start a discussion, to get everybody around the same table and have a discussion, a talk about how we do the thing. And there is it's the first the starting point. What's going on now, and how can we try to do this or this better, and is there something some points more easier than others, and that's what we try to do with Xavier Veilhan, is really to start from this point and try to make a plan to make the things little by little. It's not about changing everything at the same time. It's about just trying to do a progression in the work and in the daily life also of all the team. Because what was very interesting in this work with Xavier and his studio was that all the team was really concerned about what they were doing and how. And
how many people in the team?
There is the base is 4 people plus myself, but we're eating together at the studio, and when we're eating we're 10.
Okay.
Because there is people like you met Dimitri, for example. They are independent.
Okay.
They are building the studio and they have their own. So the structure of the studio is also it's actually linked to this environmental things. Is very souple. It's very
agile.
Agile, and it can be adapted to many situations. And I think instead of having a heavy structure, because at some point we were like 12, 14 people here, and then the structure start to have less communication within the team, because there is too many information passing by, and so
it's interesting because you talk about long term and short term. What will we change in the future, and what can change now? And that's interesting that we are at Change Now to talk about this.
I think, excuse me to interrupt, but
yeah, sorry.
I think because a link to the size of the team, for example, is also when I'm talking to my accountant, he's telling me I should develop and make more money, and my aim is not to make more money, but or to have a bigger team, for example. But my concern is to have access to things, and to be the smallest and to have the biggest access. And so it's not the same logic as a company that want to grow and send more money to the people putting money in the project. So it's different. It's a long-term project of bringing my work where I want to bring it, which is quite different. So, and it's linked to so it's a political, economical position that is linked to the consumption also, because if you are smaller, you have less consumption.
Very interesting. What is it to reach the ideal balance point between, like you say, the size of the team and your outreach? Very interesting. And Sylvie, you have been working with corporates and companies who generate a lot of waste. How is it different to work with this sort of agile team, and for an artist that does not generate that much waste compared to a corporate, but who maybe have more outreach and more influence?
Yeah, there is a very good point about influence, of course, because we know that the work of the artists is seen all over the world. So, of course, if they have an ecological interest, and it's of course a good sensibilization for everybody. And I think, as you said, Xavier, you have a small team and you want to stay small, and it's a kind of great agility for being able to have a look on everything and being able to talk directly with your suppliers, with the independents who work with you, and that's a good point, because there is a transparency which is very fundamental in the ecological transition of your work. So that's of course a bit easier, I mean, comparing to big companies, but the impact is not the same too. I mean, it's of course easier to change something in a small team than in a big company. So
concretely, with your methodology, so you talked about all the assessment of what are you doing now, and what are the first steps that you can talk about of what you have already put in place or you want to put in place in the next coming years to inspire people who will be looking at this interview?
Well, it's if I may answer, we have a compost here, so we have a biological basket delivered at the studio. We change the electricity, l'abonnement électrique
company.
The company. So we followed your advice, I think, on that, and we swap the traditional car to an electric car, and we are working on a place to park the bicycles. We have bicycles. A lot of people are using bicycles, but what we want to develop is also within the artworks. For example, the model, which is the core of the mold, was made with polyurethane foam before, and now we swap to a more expensive solution, but doing the core with wood. But then we can use the wood as a model, as a sculpture. We are re-cleaning it, so it's also changing the habits in terms of processes, fabrication processes. But what we try to develop also together is to have a benchmark and to be able to judge and to make a decision on whether we should fabricate a big piece, for example, on location or transport it. And it's very difficult to have, it's an equation with a lot of unknown within. And we work on having a solution on that. And it's very important to have not only average feeling, but to have figures on that.
So you talked about things that you do at the scale of the studio, things you do at the scale of your exhibitions. You also talked to me while we were visiting the studio that you also managed an exhibition from a distance. How does this happen? And my question behind this to the artist is to ask you, do you feel that those ecological constraints hinder or are deterrent to your creativity, and how do you work around these constraints?
I think it's a more philosophical issue that you have to feel in sympathy with your environment, and I'm interested in the idea, which is more metaphysical, of the environment, which is not only the river next to you or the forest next to you, but not only something that is within the atmosphere, which is called Gaia by Bruno Latour, for example. But for me, it's a whole universe, and we don't know the universe, and we are insignificant compared to the universe. When we know are in a situation that we can see every day that we alter the environment within the atmosphere. So there is on one scale a very strong impact that we have to reduce right now, and we are in an emergency, which I realized only like 3 years ago, I think, for myself, and I have to think about different issues. But for example, I was in Berlin when Chernobyl happened, and I was very shocked with the comparison of the information within Germany and with my friends from France, for example. So just to say, I think information is a key to those issues, and we have to develop not only it's political statement. We have to put pressure on politics to change the relation to our environment.
Is this also something that Les Augures does, putting pressure and being an advocate for that transition?
We know that a lot of change have to happen in the political and political world, of course, because all the people who organize and write the cahier des charges, they need to have some obligation, ecological. They need to put ecological obligation in the cahier des charges. I don't know in English. And if this happen, of course, all the cultural world and all the events and of the cultural world will change, of course. So that's a big point. And we also need the industry, because there is really a link between the industry and research and development that they experience now with new materials and circular materials, that the art world can test and experiment in their artwork or scenography or everything that we do in the cultural world. So we need to also to think that the art world is really a good place to experiment new way of produce, and in a small size, so it can be a good experimentation. Yeah.
What's the next project for you, Sylvie, and then we'll let Xavier conclude?
The next project, we have many in Les Augures, which is really nice. I can't just say one project, but I think the best thing that we are doing now, and what is what we're gonna do, is to really to federate the cultural world, to talk and have a discussion about everything, all the points that we can go through an ecological transition.
Can we mention a few of those players?
We are working for the city of Paris, the cultural ministry, and also incubators for cultural startups with impact for the cultural world.
Thank you so much. And you, Xavier?
Well, we are working on a few public art projects in different countries, and we're doing a piece for the Olympics, which might happen. It's a very interesting process because there is everything has turned very uncertain due to the sanitary crisis, but it's interesting to see how we can survive in this environment, which is a bit tricky. But as I like to say, it's a new situation, and everything new is good. So as a good part, at least. So I don't want to say that this epidemic is a good thing, but we have good things to take out of this experience, I think. And then I'm working on a show in New York, happening beginning of November, and a new performance which is called Tout l'univers, which is on this cosmic feeling about approach of the environment.
Thank you very much to you two.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.